Hi, this is James Shug with Westpac London's end of day report for Wednesday, July the 25th. Well, there was a bit of a respite for markets today after at least 3 days of pretty serious losses. Triggered, I think, by a range of factors. We had some decent earnings results, both sides of the Atlantic, automakers in Europe, Boeing in the US, Caterpillar was another one in the US. On the other hand, there were some negative reports too. Apple, of course, reported after the close in the US yesterday, and they disappointed. Deutsche Bank disappointed, and that contributed to losses on the banking sector stocks in Germany, at least. But that was offset by decent gains by the car makers. On the economics front, there was some reminders that there are still problems in Europe, with the German IFO Business Climate Index for July falling from 105.2 to 103.2. It was at the weaker end of expectations, and when you look at a chart, the index looks very much like it did in 2008 when the German economy was last heading into now the US reported new home sales in June. They fell 8.5%. Now, back revisions meant that there's still a bit of an uptrend in that series since about the third quarter of last year, but at the margin, the weak number was a bit of a disappointment for markets, and that offset some of the positive earnings news I mentioned. The other developments in the UK, we had the second quarter GDP print came in down 0.7%. That's the steepest decline in GDP in the UK since the recession of 2009. It's the third quarter in a row of contraction in GDP, and it's the fifth quarter in the last 7 where there's been a minus sign in front of the quarterly change. Now, the weather was really crappy in the quarter. April and June in particular were very wet months, much wetter than usual, and that caused a lot of disruption. And also we had an extra public holiday in June for the Queen's Jubilee, and the statistician tried to estimate how much that impact would have had. Couldn't come up with a firm number, but he did suggest that the underlying story wouldn't have been as weak as the minus 0.7% implied. Nevertheless, the UK economy probably is still in a shallow recession, and it certainly hasn't stopped the politicians on both sides of the political spectrum today from having a real go at each other's policies in relation to that GDP result. That's the main news on the economy. One thing I will mention too, though, and it's perhaps part of the reason why markets have calmed down a bit today, is that the Austrian Central Bank Governor Novotny, he said that he could see some of the advantages that giving the European Stability Mechanism a banking licence would have. That would mean it could borrow from the European Central Bank, and it would be able to increase its firepower, as it were. So it would also get around the issues that the ECB itself has with buying troubled sovereigns' bonds in the secondary market. In other words, engaging in quantitative easing. It gets around those issues because it wouldn't be the ECB itself doing the purchases. It would be lending the money to ESM Bank, who would then make the purchases. Now, Novotny in the past has said that he wouldn't rule out the ECB engaging in quantitative easing if deflation were to prove to be a serious risk. So he's at the more liberal end, if you like, of the ECB Council, but nevertheless his comments seem to have helped rule a bit of a line, at least for the time being, under the European sovereign concerns that were really heating up over the last few days. But they're still there, believe me. It's just that they haven't been driving markets as much today. And speaking of markets, the numbers just ahead of the European close include the FTSE down 0.2%, the French market flat on the day, the Germans up 0.1%, the Spanish market's up 0.5%, and the Italians managed a 0.75% gain. And the Dow at the moment's up 0.33%, but the broader S&P 500 is down 0.4%, with the Nasdaq down too. I mean, Apple was off sharply, as were other tech stocks, and that's what's impacted on the broader S&P, although the Dow's up at the moment at 12,658. In commodity markets, we've got oil down just over 1% at $87.50 a barrel. Copper's up 0.5%, and gold's up 1.5% at $1,604 an ounce. The Aussie dollar is back above 1.02 against the US dollar, having dipped. Actually, it rose to above 1.03 today, but has fallen back a little bit since then, back under 1.03. That compares to yesterday when it was trading under 102. So it's towards the upper end of that 102 to 103 range at the moment. Okay, that's it from me today. I'll be back same time tomorrow.